Hi, my name is Buxton. Welcome to Beginner Series 013. I have a background in quantity surveying and also consultancy within the construction industry, especially to experience to deal with the construction, the actual construction happening, and estimation in terms of how to handle such works. So this is the right channel where you will you will be able to understand estimation and also be able to understand measurements at large in matters that are related to quantity surveying. So today we have another new episode that we are going to learn. But before that, please, if you haven't subscribed, I would urge you to make a subscription so that you don't miss any of these interesting videos that we are making in regard to construction. So welcome to Beginner Series 013. Today I would like us to learn a few components of principles of measurements. As the name suggests, the principles simply means the rules which are guiding the estimation or measurements at large. So before we get into now the actual estimation or taking off, I would like us to see a few theoretical principles that are presented for you, that I would like us to see how they apply. And the essence of this is that we need to learn the theoretical bits for this session, and thereafter we start now doing the interpretation of the drawing. And this is entirely to put into perspective what we are yet to learn in terms of estimation, because there are few parts that as we now will be doing our estimation, you know that we won't be coming back to do the theoretical basis. And the reason is we want us to get it done in a manner that is procedural, in a manner that once one bit is complete, then you are sure that you have the details right in as much as when surveying is concerned. So the first bit that I would like us to study or talk about is the parties involved in the building process. I won't take it as an obvious concept that definitely you know the parties, because these theoretical bit cannot be overlooked. There are those parties that are involved in undertaking the construction. So I just want us to see why the parties that we are talking about here, and see how that happens. So let's just have a look at the parties that I want us to take note of. Well, so there we are. The parties that are involved, just want us to see how that goes. Yeah, just all right, so here we are. Let's see what we have. So the main reference is one of the books that I authored myself. I made to write it so that it can help us in making our references. And I believe it's quite important that if you feel the desire to get this book, because it's we won't be going into every detail of the items one by one. You can always reach me at the description where we have the contacts are provided. You reach me there, then you can acquire your copy of this book that is called Principles of Measurements 1. So from this, you realize that we are not going to cover every word by word in terms of the coverage, but then you might like to go you might need to go through it at personal level, so that you are able to internalize much more in terms of what I'm presenting in this video. So the parties that I would like us to talk about include the client, the architect, the quantity surveyor, consulting engineers. And of course, just going through them alone isn't enough, because you need to go through them, see who they are, and also be able to describe the roles of each of them. So for instance, at point 1, we are talking about the client. Okay, we are talking about the client. So the client, the other important bit of this section would be what are the roles of the client and who is the client. And some people would refer to him or her as the employer, but for this session we'll say the client. So the client is now the one to whom you are doing the work. Okay, the one to which the consultants are doing the work for, in terms of intending, the one with the idea to build, or the one that is the one in which you as the consultant is doing for the consultancy in terms of building and so on. So that is the client. Then we have other participants, including the architect, that I would like also to see. We have the architect. Okay, the architect does the design, and in most cases, in the setting, depending on which location you are, the architect is the one that leads the building team. So they are the ones that are concerned with definition of the spaces in which the client, as a client's idea, is directing to. So they are the ones that define the spaces, and then they also make sure that the aesthetic appearance of the house that has been designed is in order. So incorporate whatever the structural engineer does into, okay, of course the structural engineer incorporates what the architect has already designed, so that you are able to obey that first concept which the architect had, in matter of ensuring that what we have in terms of the design is aesthetically appealing and can be approved by the architect. I mean by the client, to the satisfaction of the client. So the other one is the quantity surveyor. So the quantity surveyor, as when we were starting, we had different our definitions, and also you are able to see the various roles of the quantity surveyor. So the quantity surveyor is now basically entitled to undertake now the ensuring that the budget estimation of the works yet to be done, that is depending on the stage where the project has reached, and then after the estimation, and then now the cost control while the building is being undertaken, or the construction is being undertaken. Then we have the engineers. So the engineers can be the structural engineer, you can have the services engineer. So all of them, for instance, the structural engineer is majorly concerned about the structural stability of the house. So anything to do with the structure, including the beams, the columns, the designs of the foundations, and so on, so that the house stands firmly without any compromise. That is now the role of the engineer in terms of the construction, the building process. So let's see if at all there is any other one that we are leaving out. We've talked about the engineers, other consultants. Okay, of course, can say about contractors, subcontractors, and so on. Yeah, so the other two that we haven't said include, we can also talk about the contractor. Now the contractor is entirely, before you become a contractor, you are just a bidder. So once you've undergone the bidding process and you're successful, then you are now appointed to undertake the building, the construction. So the person who undertakes the construction of a given structure, okay, that is now the contractor. So apart from the contractor, of course, the contractor comes with other parties, including the subcontractors and so on, who can also be appointed by maybe by the client direct, depending on the terms of engagement. They can be a nominated subcontractor or a domestic subcontractor. So these are just the parties, some of the parties who are involved in this building process, and it's just as important to know who are they and the roles of each of them. So for you to get more of what we've talked about, you can the book is available. The book is available that you can buy it in a soft copy, and then you have an elaborate coverage of what we have just given in a bulletin for our session today. Then I would like us to go through now the second topic, and that is the history of measurements. So normally anything that you undertake, you always it's always important that you understand what led to a given process. Now for our case here, we are very precise in what we are doing, and it's about measurements and estimation. So what are those theories that are put in place that led into the beginning of measurements or estimation? So before we get there, let's just see some of the explanations that are available. Now that is the history of measurements. And from the presentation, it's something that began quite a while between 18th century, then that is the end, towards the end of it, and then the beginning of the 19th century. So that is quite a while back, before I'm sure that before myself was there and majority that are here were not yet in the picture. Yes. So at the moment when the construction was being done, there was a means of construction, because if you get to the history of those structures that were built long ago, they were built, so it means the construction existed. But in real sense, you can't be sure that the concept of measurements was there, but in a way there was how it was done. So maybe entirely you can't refer to it as a measurement, but there was something that was done. So that is why we like to know what is the history, what was it that was being undertaken during that time. So from what is from the research that has been put in place, you note that there were craftsmen. So craftsmen were now the ones that were undertaking the construction during those times. I've said end of the 18th century and the beginning of the 19th century, where now the measurements and the design was separated. Okay, the design, which were the traditional architects, and then now the measurements was put to be identified as two different scope of work in the construction industry. So the craftsmen, now the guys who are entitled to responsible to do the building, they could employ the guys who are now doing the measurement of what is intended to be built. Okay, and then now after the construction has been done, it was measured, and then after the construction has been done is when the costing was supposed to be undertaken. Unlike now, where the costing is entirely done, the estimation basically is entirely done ahead of construction. But then at this time, the craftsman now employs the people to measure for them, and then after the construction is when the costing is undertaken. Okay, so the measurer, as it stated, the measurer would do the quantities and do the pricing as well. Okay, and then taken to the client for payment through the architects. So that given process has been maintained even to date. That is how it happens. But then now the modern craftsmen are now the contractors. Okay, now in this time part of the world now, in this point in time, the contractors would employ now quantity surveyors. So in that time, it was now the craftsmen who are now employing a measurer. They were now just called measurer, not the quantity surveyors. Quite interesting. So once you have the craftsmen, and then you now employ the measurers, after the construction, they now do the pricing. Then after that, of course, take it through the client, and take it through the architect, through the client, and then payment is done. Okay, so basically it mimics the process that it's still undertaken to date, in which the contractor employs is a quantity surveyor who does application for the payment. In your application for the payment, you are simply stating this and these have been done, and these were the rates in which we signed the contract against. Okay, then you now make an application that I have done this. And of course, now the quantity surveyor, once you make your application, the quantity surveyor comes to the site and ascertains that truly the contractor has done this much, and this is what is due to him in terms of the payment. So basically that process has been maintained in terms of the way it has been taken into place. Okay, then now time went by. You realize that from the beginning, now it was toward the end of the 18th century to the 19th century. Okay, just in a summary. So towards the beginning of the 19th century, now where the craftsmen were doing the construction, then they were now employing the measurers. Okay, so the measurers undertake the costing and then the pricing of the works. Once it has been done, channel it through the architect, and then a payment is remitted. Then now comes towards the mid of the 19th century. So what happened? Okay, so where now this is now they started the emergence of independent quantity surveyor. Okay, reducing the risk of architect design and supervision. Now things got to be more advanced. Now we had an independent quantity surveyor, leave alone the one that was being employed by the craftsmen for that particular time. Yes, basically this was advantageous in the sense that the architect who was entitled to do the design and supervision will now have nothing to do with interference with what we call the pricing. So this was an independent quantity surveyor. Okay, the craftsmen now could be called now the contractors at this time, where they would prepare their own bills of quantities, okay, and give on measurement. So each contractor still at this stage would employ a measurer, which was considered wasteful. Yeah, hence working on the same construction would employ one measurer who would then present his own tender. Okay, the architects realized the rates of winning tenders were very useful in valuation of building works, hence marking the beginning of independent quantity surveyor who would be employed by the client to prepare the bills of quantities. So just in summary, this is just giving us the process of how the emergence of measurement, how it came into place. So you realize that starting from the onset, at the let me just see. Yeah, starting from the onset, you realize that you can state out that just in a summary. So it started towards the end of 18th century. Okay, towards the end of 18th century and beginning of 19th century. Okay, so just in summary, in this period of time, the ones who existed were called craftsmen. Okay, so the craftsmen were the ones who were building. Craftsmen, you can call them now the contractors. So there existed only the craftsmen. So what was the role of the craftsmen? The craftsmen were to build. Okay, in this time the architects also existed, and of course the clients also existed. So the craftsmen and you can call them the contractors. So once they were building, they employed their own measurers. So the measurers, once the work has been done, the measurers would do the measurement and pricing. So once you've priced now the work after you've done it, then you channel it to the architect. Architect who then now approves your payment through to the client. Now the client makes the payment to the craftsman. Okay, so it was the middle of the 19th century, then mid of 19th century. At this time, now an independent quantity surveyor was proposed to reduce the risk of the architect doing the design and supervision, and also still involving in the other roles of the measurer. So in that time, now we have an independent quantity surveyor. Independent quantity surveyor was now brought on board. Okay, so once the independent quantity surveyor was brought on board to undertake his roles, still the contractors were still employing their employing their quantity surveyors on the site. So this was later realized that you now want to have a lean construction process with minimal waste. So this one was considered wasteful. So during that time, now the independent quantity surveyor was now then employed by the client. Okay, so once the conception stage has taken place, then of the conception of the idea of the client, now the building is yet to be done. So the client now employs an independent quantity surveyor to prepare the bills of quantities. So that is now what is mimicked tool today in terms of that process of undertaking the building or the construction process at large. So basically that is the interesting summary of how the measurements became into existence. Well, now we go to the third coverage for today, that is types of bills of quantities. So we like to see that as we will be advancing into now preparation of the bills of quantities, which are the available options, and which is the one that you like to adopt in as a quantity surveyor. So it's quite important that you know that this type of bills of quantity that we are making is called as such, or is identified as such, and the other options that are available include this and that. So we still go to our reference and see the types of bills of quantities. So we have one called the trades bills of quantities. Okay, that is one. Another one is called elemental bills of quantities. Okay, those are the two types that I would like us to cover today. So one is called trades bills of quantities. Okay, and elemental bills of quantities. All right, there's a typo there, just have to remove it. Elemental bills of quantities and trades bills of quantities. Okay, so this one is also not rightly written, so that is the right way. So these types of bills of quantities, we like to get which one is which, what is trades bills of quantities, and how is it prepared, and how is it applicable. Quite interesting. So let's see from our reference still. Alright, so the trades bills of quantities. So in these types of bills of quantities, the works are grouped together according to trade and skills required in the execution. Okay, then it's the original type of BQ which was prepared by the contractors to meet their requirements. Their format corresponds to the standard methods of measurements. Okay, so what does that mean in terms of items are grouped together according to the trade and the skills required to measure them, or the skills required to do them? So you realize that in a building or in a construction, items, there are quite a number of items that are involved. You can call them elements and so on. So there are those that you group them together. You realize that the way the bills of quantities have been put, like you have for instance construction, concrete works. So all items to deal with the concrete works, because how they are done or how they are implemented is the same, so you group those together. Then you have walling. Okay, that doesn't correspond to the way in which the construction is being done, but it's corresponding to the way in which the skills that are applicable in doing them are grouped. Okay, so that is the main identification. They are grouped together according to trade and skills, and it's the original type of the bills of quantities prepared by the contractors to meet their requirements. The format corresponds to the standard methods of measurements. If at all you haven't watched the standard methods of measurements that we've had an elaborate coverage on, then you can do so, because they are in the previous videos, which as we giving you all the scope, the whole sections of the standard methods of measurements. Let's just see how that has been distributed. So talking of the arrangement of the way in which the trades bills of quantities corresponding to the standard methods of measurements. So these are the sections which have been provided in the standard methods of measurement. So that given trades bills of quantities is corresponding to this, in that the skills required in executing these works, for instance, we are talking about excavations, the skills required for the same is 1. So the way in which they are categorized is corresponding to these particular standard methods. So we have excavations and earthworks, piling, concrete work, for instance, that the one that I just mentioned. So all the items that are within the concrete works are grouped together. Then if you go to walling, all those other items are also grouped together. Okay, so that is how that the identification of that bills of quantities, the so-called trades bills of quantities. So I would like to see the other type, and the other type is called let me just go to the other one. All right, so the other one, so first we've talked about the trades bills of quantities. So the advantages includes bringing together all items required for a particular trade. Okay, it also makes it quite easy for contractor to compute total materials required for the project. And we have disadvantages. Makes it quite difficult to prepare interim valuations, does not aid in cost planning, does not follow order of construction. So the other one is entirely based on grouping of the items of how the skills that are required to do them, but does not mimic the exact process in which the construction is undertaken on site. So that is the main difference, and of course it now falls as at a disadvantage under the trades bills of quantities. Then a lot of time consuming in preparation. Okay, then we have operational bills of quantities. So actually we have 3 of them. Before we go to the elemental, then we have operational bills of quantities. Okay, yeah, so this is 1, 2, and 3. So let's see what is operational bills of quantities and what are the characteristics. Okay, so this one entails description of the build work. Actually, before we go to that, because it's important that we jot the main characters of these. So before we go to the operational, for the trades bills of quantities, it's the main characteristic, it's that items are categorized depending on the skills of execution required. Okay, so that is the outstanding characteristic of that. Does not mimic the way in which construction is done on site or the actual implementation of the construction. Okay, that is that one there called, just use this to make the differences become clearer. All right, that's okay. Then we have this one. We have the operational bills of quantities. So we want to see what is now the outstanding characteristics of the operational bills of quantities. It entails the description of the build work followed by the actual building process, with materials shown separately from labor, all described as the operations necessary for the construction of the building. Then the operations include on-site, which includes materials, equipment, and labor. Then off-site, which includes materials cast away from construction site, such as fabricating windows. So this one, I would describe it as now, you realize that in construction there are those professionals, now the quantity surveyors, who have learned another type of bills of quantity that we are yet to see, just in a few. But then the operational bills of quantities, these are now you can call them the quotations that are done by, let me say, the fundis or so on, those that do not have the other skill in terms of the one that the quantity surveyor possesses in description of his works and also arranging the works in terms of the way in which the work is supposed to be executed on site. Okay, so in this case, the items have been separated in terms of material that are needed and also labor, also the items that are need to be done on site and those that need to be done off the site. So basically that is now the main description of this in terms of so it's separated in sorry, just to see what's going on. Separated in components of materials. Okay. Yeah, components of materials, labor, and works to be done on site and off the site. So it's simply just a description of that you have this piece of work. So these are the materials that I will need, okay, and this is now the labor that will be needed, and then these are the works that can be attained on working on them on site, and these are the other ones that will have to be done off the site. So it's basically an operation basis in terms of materials, labor. You can also have plant and equipment and so on. So that is the major distinction of that operational bills of quantities. Then we now have to look at this other one, the elemental bills of quantities. So let's see what also separates apart now what's an elemental bills of quantities. So elements are grouped together according to the position in the building. Okay, each element comprises an integral part of building. Of course, this is now a definition of an element. An element is now a part of a building that is performing a specific function. We talk about walling. So walling is an element. We talk about roof. Roof is an element performing the function of that I've explained previously, giving you protection from the extremities of weather, and also just it's also a structural element because it supports the weight for the covering material. So then the features of the element. Okay, these are features of element. Must be reconciled with the description used by the other professionals, must be easily separated by the drawings and the BQ. It must be defined exactly. Now those are elements. Okay, so in these types of bills of quantities, items are the bills of quantities is prepared in relation to the elements. Okay, so it's walling has been done together. That's a now element. It performs a specific function. So we talk about the walling now, everything that is concerned with that. Then the other, those are the types of the bills. The bills of quantities. So we've talked about the trades bills of quantities, operational bills of quantities, and then elemental bills of quantities. Then we go to the functions of the standard methods of measurement, something that we had already covered in our while we were covering the standard methods of measurements. So of course, provide a uniform basis of measuring building works, embodies the essential of good practice, and ensures professionalism. So these are items that we had covered, and for any reference while we are beginning the standard methods of measurements coverage, we had talked about them. So if you haven't got this clear in this basis or in this part, then you can refer to the previous sections that we had already covered while we were starting the standard methods of measurements. Then finally for today, we'll look at also the uses of bills of quantities. Why is it important? And now that we are intending to now start doing it, the actual measurements, why would you need that? Enables all contractors tendering on the same contract to price on exactly the same information. You know that is normally the reason why during the tendering it's normally in PDF form, so that it's not prone to manipulation in terms of editing. So unless you have a sophisticated Excel format which cannot be altered, then it's always important that you have, if it's not hard copy, then it's in a PDF form that is not easily editable. So in even one of the tendering rules says that the document should be returned in the original form, and that is basically because of when the bills of quantity has been provided, you have to price based on one similar information across for all the tenderers. Okay, it also removes the risk element when the contractor rates he enters in the BQ, provides basis for valuation of variations which often occur during the progress of the work. So when you are having during the valuations, there are variations that occur. So when you have a bills of quantities, it's easier for you to make a reference that this was what we priced against in terms of the quantity, but then this is now what has been built. So it allows that variations to be taken into consideration as the work is being done. Okay. Yeah, it also helps in providing the identification of the location of work. So as you are titling your bills of quantities, it's always advisable that you state the location in which that work is going to be done. Provides a basis of cost analysis once you have done your pricing for all the items. Then gives an itemized list of components of building work with clear description and quantity for each. Hence may assist in a successful contractor on ordering materials and assessing the labor requirement by the contractor. Prompt the client and design team to finalize the project particulars before the bill can be provided. Yes, so this is the another bit here is on the history of quant surveying. So all these items, these are ones that you can always find when you have this version, which I would urge, if you can reach it, just get through the description down there at the description of my channel, then you will find the contacts. So from there you can get your copy that you can read all these items that are listed here. History of quant surveying, also well elaborated there. So when you have that copy, you are able to find it quite easy. Then roles of QS for the side of the client. So all these are also elaborated properly in terms of from these document that I'm working with. So they're available when you need one, then you can find these in soft copy for your benefit. And of course, lastly, the communication in building industry. What's the importance of communication? Of course, just the relaying information and getting a feedback on top in terms of what you are talking about. That is now the communication. So why is it important? And you realize that when you are doing construction, there are a lot of so many parties you are dealing with, and in that case there is that point of possibility of disputes, especially when the information isn't read properly in terms of whom you're talking with and what you're talking about in terms of the works. So in that case, then it's important that you make communication to build confidence among the building members and also maintain the relationship on construction projects. Also efficient and inclusive decision making. When there is an instruction from the architect, it's important that it's noted down, then shared with all other building team, and then everyone knows what was decided and how it's supposed to be implemented. So that builds confidence, and that brings construction at large very efficient in terms of execution. Also facilitates idea sharing and innovation owing to the varied professionals' background, and so on. Then you will have barriers of effective communication. This is something that is common: insufficient period for adjustment, distrust, impersonal communication, and so on. So that is also, communication flow is also part of this part that we are talking about, and all that it entails. Also forms of communication, and so on. So that said, that brings us to the end of our coverage today in terms of what we intended to go through. for our session today. So that brings us to the end, and thank you so much for being part of this channel. Thank you so much for watching. So moving forward, I would urge you that you keep subscribing, because the part that we are moving into next is entirely now on interpretation of the drawing and making the drawing, preparing the taking off and preparing the bills of quantities, which is even going to be more interesting. So thank you very much. Please click that subscription button right now, because you are going to miss so much. Thank you for being part of the channel. Thank you for watching. Bye bye, and see you in our next session.